Hello, English learners. Welcome to another exciting episode of our podcast, where we uncover the best ways to learn English quickly, effectively, and enjoyably. I'm Adam, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Sophia. How are you doing today, Sophia?
I'm great, Adam, and I'm so excited about today's topic. It's something that combines two of my favorite things, traveling and learning languages. Today we're talking about why traveling is the best way to improve your English pronunciation.
That's right. We're going to dive into why immersing yourself in an English-speaking environment can supercharge your learning. Think about it. You're surrounded by native speakers, constantly hearing how words are pronounced, and actively using English in real-life situations. It's like the ultimate crash course.
Absolutely. And the best part? It's not just about learning. It's about experiencing new cultures, making unforgettable memories, and building your confidence in ways you never thought possible.
In this episode, we'll break down the science of learning through immersion, share our personal travel stories, and give you practical tips to maximize your learning when you're abroad. Whether you're planning a trip or just dreaming about it, this episode is packed with insights to help you level up your English.
Plus, stick around because later in the episode, we'll reveal our top 5 travel hacks for improving your English pronunciation quickly and easily. And we've got some hilarious travel anecdotes you won't want to miss.
All right, let's kick things off with something really interesting: the psychology behind why traveling is such an effective way to learn English pronunciation. You may have heard that immersion is one of the best ways to learn a language, but why exactly is that? Let's break it down.
Exactly. So, when you travel, you're putting yourself in an environment where English is spoken all around you. This constant exposure has a powerful impact on your brain. Studies show that when we hear a language consistently in context, our brains start to absorb the patterns and sounds much more naturally than if we were just studying it from a textbook.
It's like being a sponge, right? The more you hear English, the more your brain begins to process the sounds, the stress patterns, and the rhythm of the language. This is exactly how native speakers learn to speak in the first place, through constant exposure from birth.
And this process is even more powerful because you're not just listening to random English words. When you travel, you're hearing English in a real-world context, like ordering a coffee or asking for directions. Your brain automatically begins to associate the sounds with meaning, which helps improve both your listening and pronunciation skills.
Right, so it's not just about hearing English, it's about hearing it in action. For example, when you're in London, hearing a local say lorry instead of truck, or hearing mate as a term of endearment. It's all about understanding how pronunciation shifts depending on where you are. And that helps your brain tune into the subtleties of pronunciation, something that's hard to do just by studying words in isolation.
Exactly. It's also about muscle memory. The more you practice speaking English in real-world situations, the more your mouth, tongue, and lips get used to the sounds. Pronunciation is all about physical movement, and by speaking English every day, you're training those muscles to move in ways that produce the correct sounds.
That's a great point. And this is where traveling has an edge over traditional classroom learning. In a classroom, you're often sitting at a desk, repeating words after a teacher. But in real-world situations, when you have to speak to someone face-to-face, your brain and body react differently. You're forced to focus on clarity, tone, and the exact way to pronounce each word to be understood.
And it's not just speaking, it's listening too. Your brain picks up on subtle changes in tone, stress, and intonation. If you're listening to someone speak in a relaxed, natural setting, like in a cafe or at a local market, you start to notice things like how fast or slow people speak, how they emphasize certain words, and even the contractions they use.
It's like this beautiful process of language immersion. You're not just learning vocabulary, you're learning how to use it. And you're hearing the pronunciation of words the way they're naturally used in conversation, which makes it easier to reproduce those sounds yourself.
And it all ties back to a key principle in language learning: context. When you travel, you're learning English in the context of everyday life, so it's easier to remember and use what you've learned.
Exactly. In a classroom, it's easy to forget a word or phrase once the lesson ends. But when you're traveling, you're constantly in learning mode. You're actively using English in real situations, which makes the learning stick.
So, whether you're hearing someone with a British accent, a Southern American accent, or even a Canadian one, every accent adds a new layer to your understanding of pronunciation. The more you hear, the more your brain fine-tunes itself to recognize these different sounds.
And there's something really powerful about learning through experience. Instead of memorizing a list of words, you're learning pronunciation in the context of meaningful, real-world interactions. That's why travel is so effective. It's not just a trip. It's an opportunity to unlock a deeper understanding of the language. And there's something really powerful about learning through experience. Instead of memorizing a list of words, you're learning pronunciation in the context of meaningful, real-world interactions. That's why travel is so effective. It's not just a trip. It's an opportunity to unlock a deeper understanding of the language.
So, in a nutshell, the psychology behind learning through travel is all about immersion, exposure, and real-life application. Your brain and body work together to help you not just hear the sounds of English, but also produce them correctly.
Exactly. And that's why traveling is such a game changer when it comes to learning English pronunciation. It's an experience that engages all your senses, and that's the key to mastering a language. All right, let's dive into something truly fascinating: how cultural context plays a massive role in English pronunciation. Now, we've all heard that English pronunciation can vary greatly depending on where you are in the world. But why does that happen? And how can traveling help you master it?
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics, Adam. English isn't just one language, it's a multitude of languages depending on where you are. Think about it. British English, American English, Australian English, even Irish or Indian English. They all sound different. And it's not just about vocabulary. The pronunciation is also shaped by culture, history, and even the local way of life.
Exactly. And this is something you experience firsthand when you travel. Let's take the word schedule, for example. In the UK, it's pronounced schedule, while in the US, it's schedule. Both are correct, but they sound totally different. Imagine if you only learned one version from a textbook and then traveled to the other side of the world. It could leave you scratching your head.
That's such a great example. And here's the cool part. When you travel, you hear and use these different accents and pronunciations in real life. You get to feel the cultural influence behind them. In the UK, there's this tradition of clipped, crisp pronunciation, while in the US, pronunciation can be more relaxed, with some words slurring together.
Right. And that relaxed style is super common in places like the US or Australia, where casual conversations often involve dropping sounds or merging words. In places like New York, for example, you might hear people say gonna instead of going to, or wanna instead of want to. These are super common in everyday speech, but they're tough to master if you've only been learning proper pronunciation from a textbook.
Exactly. This is where traveling really makes a difference. When you're immersed in these environments, you start to pick up on these speech patterns. You hear people say, "How y'all doing?" in the southern US, or "What's the crack?" in Ireland. And suddenly you're not just learning words, you're learning the culture behind them.
And here's the real magic. By being in a country and hearing English spoken in its cultural context, you start to get a feel for the rhythm of the language. You understand how tone, intonation, and even body language influence how something is said. Let's say you're in Australia and someone says, "Nah, it's all good," with a friendly, laid-back tone. It's not just the pronunciation you're hearing, it's the attitude behind it.
Oh, 100%. And speaking of attitude, this is why context is so important. The way people speak in different regions can tell you a lot about their social norms, attitudes, and even history. For instance, in London, you might hear a more formal tone because of the British tradition of politeness. But in New York, the tone might be much quicker, more direct. It's just a reflection of the culture and pace of life.
It's all about connection. When you travel and interact with locals, you learn to read between the lines. It's not just about saying the right word, but understanding the vibe of a place and matching it with your pronunciation. That's why practicing in these environments is so effective.
And here's the kicker. It's not just about pronunciation in standard situations. Think about slang and idiomatic expressions. These are often tied to a particular culture or even a specific region. When you're traveling, you start learning how to use expressions like, "How's it going?" in a casual situation, or "It's not my cup of tea" in more formal settings. This is where you really start to sound like a native speaker.
That's right. And these expressions are often rooted in the history or geography of a place. In the UK, for example, fancy a cuppa means do you want tea? It's all about understanding how the language evolved based on local culture. Imagine learning that phrase by sitting in a classroom versus hearing it in a cozy British cafe while locals chat and sip their tea. There's a massive difference.
Exactly. And here's a pro tip for listeners. When you're traveling, make it a point to ask locals about their phrases and expressions. They'll be so excited to share them with you, and you'll learn pronunciation in a real context, not just memorizing words from a book.
You got it. And as you immerse yourself in these different cultural settings, something incredible happens. Your brain starts recognizing these regional differences and adjusts your own pronunciation accordingly. That's the beauty of learning pronunciation through travel. You're constantly adjusting and improving based on what's around you.
And let's not forget the confidence boost. The more you hear and practice different accents and regional pronunciations, the more comfortable you become with them. So when you're back home, you're no longer afraid of sounding wrong. You've learned to embrace the diversity of English. Use I.
It's a full circle moment. Learning pronunciation in real-world situations with the culture and history that shape the language. It's like traveling isn't just about seeing new places. It's about learning a new way to speak and connect with the world.
And that's the beauty of language learning through travel. It's more than just words, it's a way to live the language. So as you plan your next adventure, remember that every new accent, every new phrase, and every cultural interaction will teach you something valuable about pronunciation.
All right, so now that we've got a good sense of why cultural context is so important for improving pronunciation, let's talk about how to choose the right travel destination. Because believe it or not all English-speaking countries are created equal when it comes to learning pronunciation.
Exactly, Adam. Choosing the right destination can make a big difference in how quickly and effectively you improve your English. You don't want to just pick a place based on your vacation dreams. You also want to think about your learning goals.
So how do you know which destination is right for you? Let's break it down. First up, how much exposure to English will you get? If you're planning to travel somewhere where English isn't the primary language, but it's widely spoken, places like the Philippines or India, you'll still get plenty of practice, but you might encounter more accents or language mixing. That can be both a blessing and a challenge.
Right. And in those cases, you'll have to focus on understanding different accents. The Philippines, for example, has a very neutral accent, which makes it a great choice for beginners. But if you're looking to challenge yourself and get used to more diverse speech patterns, then places like India or South Africa might be more suited for you.
Good point. But if your primary goal is to refine your pronunciation in a specific accent, like American or British English, then picking a country where that accent is dominant is probably your best bet. Exactly. For example, if you want to sound more American, traveling to the United States will give you real-world exposure to American English, from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast, where accents change dramatically from region to region. And let's not forget about the UK. If British English is your goal, then heading to London, Edinburgh, or even smaller towns in England will immerse you in classic British pronunciation. But keep in mind, there are many different accents even within the UK.
That's so true. And one of the fun parts about travelling within the UK is hearing all the regional accents. You've got Cockney in London, Scouse in Liverpool, Geordie in Newcastle, and Scottish accents that are totally different from English. You'll get a wide range of sounds to work with.
But hey, if you're looking to improve your English quickly and you don't necessarily have a preference for a specific accent, you might want to choose a place where English is spoken universally, like Canada or Australia.
Australia is fantastic for this because you'll be exposed to a very distinct accent, but it's also fairly neutral in terms of slang compared to, say, the UK. And Canadians. They speak with such clear, neutral pronunciation, especially in places like Toronto or Vancouver, that it's perfect for anyone looking to work on general English pronunciation without getting too caught up in regional variations.
That's a great point. Australia and Canada are awesome if you're just starting out or want a more straightforward approach to learning pronunciation. And while you're there, you'll have no shortage of opportunities to practice, whether it's chatting with locals at a cafe or asking for directions on a hike.
Exactly. And let's not forget how much fun it is to travel and explore. The best part of all this is that you'll be experiencing different cultures while improving your pronunciation. Whether you're hiking the outback in Australia or visiting a beautiful vineyard in California, you'll always be surrounded by opportunities to practice your English.
You know, another thing to consider is the pace of life in the destination. If you're in a bustling city like New York or London, people tend to speak quickly and use a lot of slang. It's exciting, but it can be challenging for learners. On the flip side, places like New Zealand or smaller towns in Canada or the US can offer a slower pace of speech, which is great for beginners who want to pick up pronunciation more gradually.
Totally. And let's not forget, traveling in places where English isn't the only language spoken, like in non-English speaking European countries or parts of Asia, can actually work to your advantage too. You'll be forced to use English in more diverse contexts, like in shops, restaurants, or even when you're navigating public transport. This is another reason why mixing English with a little bit of the local language can be so enriching for your pronunciation skills.
Absolutely. So whether you're heading to the US, UK, Australia, or even a place like Singapore, where English is spoken but there's a mix of languages, your goal is the same. Immerse yourself in the language, embrace different accents, and just listen. The more exposure you get, the better your pronunciation will be.
Exactly. And remember, no matter where you go, your mindset is key. Choose a destination that excites you, but also challenges you. You'll be more motivated to learn and push through those moments where the pronunciation feels tough. Exactly. And remember, no matter where you go, your mindset is key. Choose a destination that excites you, but also challenges you. You'll be more motivated to learn and push through those moments where the pronunciation feels tough. That's such an amazing idea. So, no matter where you choose to go, remember, the right destination is one that excites you and gives you plenty of opportunities to practice speaking English every day.
All right. We've talked a lot about why travel is such a great tool for improving your English pronunciation and how to immerse yourself once you're there. But before you pack your bags and head off, there's some essential preparation you need to do to make sure you're ready to make the most of your trip. All right. We've talked a lot about why travel is such a great tool for improving your English pronunciation and how to immerse yourself once you're there. But before you pack your bags and head off, there's some essential preparation you need to do to make sure you're ready to make the most of your trip. Step 1 is get comfortable with the basics of pronunciation. Now, I know we're all about learning through travel, but that doesn't mean you should show up completely unprepared. You don't need to be fluent, but understanding how the sounds of English work, especially tricky ones, will give you a solid foundation before you immerse yourself in the language.
Right. And one of the most helpful things to do before you go is to practice those sounds you're struggling with. Whether it's the TH sound, the R sound, or vowel pronunciation, take some time to work on those. There are plenty of great resources online, from YouTube videos to apps like Elsa Speak, where you can practice specific sounds before traveling.
Exactly. And while you're brushing up on pronunciation, it's also a great time to familiarize yourself with the accent of the region you're visiting. If you're going to the UK, for example, you might want to watch videos of British speakers to get a feel for their rhythm, stress, and intonation.
And don't just focus on formal speech. Try to listen to native speakers in casual settings like interviews, podcasts, or even YouTube videos, so you can hear how people actually speak in the real world. This will help you when you're on the ground and you're trying to pick up those regional variations.
Great advice, Sophia. Step 2. Learn key phrases and local slang. Even though you're focusing on pronunciation, learning some basic phrases and slang will help you connect with people when you arrive. Locals appreciate it when you try to speak their language, even if it's just a simple hello or thank you in their accent.
Totally. And here's the thing. Learning common phrases is a great way to get a feel for the rhythm of the language. For example, in the US, people might say, "What's up?" or "How's it going?" Those little phrases will help you sound more natural when you greet people. Plus, you'll sound more like a local if you use regional slang. Totally. And here's the thing. Learning common phrases is a great way to get a feel for the rhythm of the language. For example, in the US, people might say, "What's up?" or "How's it going?" Those little phrases will help you sound more natural when you greet people. Plus, you'll sound more like a local if you use regional slang.
And speaking of regional slang, make sure to research the specific slang or expressions that are common in the area you're visiting. For example, in Australia, "How you going?" is a casual greeting, but it's not something you'd hear in the US. Understanding these regional nuances will help you avoid confusion and sound more fluent.
Absolutely. Now, step 3. Set realistic language goals. When you're traveling, it's easy to get overwhelmed by the idea of mastering everything at once. So, set clear goals for what you want to accomplish during your trip. Do you want to improve your ability to understand local accents? Or maybe you're focused on perfecting a particular sound or phrase. Whatever your goal is, keep it simple and focused.
Great point. Having a goal in mind helps you stay motivated and gives you something to work towards. For example, you could challenge yourself to have a 5-minute conversation every day with a local, or aim to learn 5 new words or expressions each day.
Absolutely. Now, step 3. Set realistic language goals. When you're traveling, it's easy to get overwhelmed by the idea of mastering everything at once. So, set clear goals for what you want to accomplish during your trip. Do you want to improve your ability to understand local accents? Or maybe you're focused on perfecting a particular sound or phrase. Whatever your goal is, keep it simple and focused.
Step 4. Learn about cultural norms and expectations in the country you're visiting. This is often overlooked, but it's so important. Understanding the cultural context will help you interact with locals more naturally and be sensitive to pronunciation nuances.
Exactly. For example, in the UK, politeness is a huge part of communication, so you'll want to be aware of how people speak in formal and informal settings. In some countries, certain words may be pronounced more formally in a business context, but much more casually in a social setting.
And you can practice these different tones before you go. Research the communication style in the area you're traveling to. Are people more formal? Do they use humor in casual settings? This helps you adapt your pronunciation to the context, which is a crucial skill in becoming fluent.
And speaking of adapting, step 5 is prepare for the accents and regional pronunciation variations. If you're heading to a place like New York City or even the southern US, be prepared for some fast-paced speech and unique pronunciations. The same goes for British English. It can vary greatly depending on whether you're in London, Manchester, or the countryside.
This is where doing a bit of research on the specific accent you'll be exposed to can be incredibly helpful. Try listening to podcasts or watching YouTube videos where you can hear real conversations from the area. The more you prepare, the less likely you'll be caught off guard by unexpected pronunciation.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask locals for help. People are usually more than happy to slow down their speech or explain pronunciation quirks if you ask politely. So, embrace those moments of curiosity and let them guide your learning.
And last but not least, step 6. Build confidence and a positive mindset before you travel. It's totally normal to feel a bit nervous about speaking with a new accent, but remember, confidence is key when it comes to pronunciation. The more you speak, the more natural it'll feel.
That's right. Traveling is all about stepping outside your comfort zone, so the more you practice, the more confident you'll become. And when you're confident, your pronunciation will naturally improve.
So there you have it, folks. Some essential preparation tips to get you ready for your English learning adventure. Take the time to prepare, and you'll be amazed at how quickly your pronunciation improves once you're on the ground.
Exactly. By setting yourself up with the right mindset, tools, and goals, you'll be ready to dive into the immersive experience of learning English while traveling.
All right, we're back. And now that we've covered the importance of preparation, let's dive into what happens once you're on the ground. How to make the most of your travel experience by immersing yourself in the language, which, let's face it, is the best way to improve your pronunciation.
Absolutely, Adam. Immersive experiences are what truly accelerate your language skills. I mean, you can study all the grammar rules and vocabulary in the world, but nothing compares to the real-world practice you get when you're living and breathing the language every day.
Right. And the beauty of traveling is that you don't have to go looking for opportunities. They're everywhere. From ordering your morning coffee to asking for directions or chatting with a local at a museum, there are endless chances to interact in English.
Exactly. Let's start with one of the most obvious but most powerful ways to immerse yourself. Real-life conversations. This is your chance to use the language in an authentic way. And it's not just about what you say. It's about how you listen, too.
Great point, Sophia. When you're interacting with locals, pay close attention to how they pronounce words. Listen to the rhythm, stress patterns, and intonation of their speech. This is where you start to pick up on those small nuances that you might not notice in a textbook or video lesson.
And don't just stick to the easy conversations. Sure, ordering food or asking for directions is great practice, but also push yourself to engage in more complex interactions. Ask about local traditions, customs, or history. You'll not only improve your pronunciation, but also deepen your understanding of the culture.
And if you're nervous about making mistakes, don't be. Locals appreciate the effort, and they'll often correct you or help you out if you don't quite get it right. That's one of the best things about traveling. People are generally patient and supportive when they see you're trying to communicate.
Right. And here's a great tip. Shadowing is a fantastic technique for improving your pronunciation during these conversations. It's simple. Just repeat what the speaker says, imitating their tone, rhythm, and emphasis. You're not just listening, you're actively practicing the sounds as they're being spoken.
Shadowing is awesome because it helps your brain map the sounds and movements of speech, making your pronunciation much more natural over time. So, when you're in a conversation, try to mimic the way the person says a word and feel how your mouth and tongue move. It's like muscle memory for pronunciation.
Another way to immerse yourself is by participating in local activities or cultural events. Whether it's joining a cooking class, taking a walking tour, or attending a community event, these are all perfect opportunities to practice speaking in a relaxed, natural setting.
I love that. And in these settings, you're not just practicing your pronunciation, you're also learning new vocabulary related to specific activities. For instance, if you're in a cooking class, you'll be learning food-related terms and phrases and hearing how they're pronounced in context.
Exactly, Adam. Plus, these environments give you a chance to hear real speech, the kind of casual, everyday language that isn't necessarily taught in textbooks. This is the type of exposure that helps your brain start thinking in English, not just translating from your native language.
And let's not forget about the power of listening. Immersing yourself in the language is about more than just speaking. It's about listening deeply, too. Tune in to local radio stations, podcasts, and TV shows. Whether you're in a cafe or on a bus, pay attention to how people speak. The more you listen, the more you'll pick up on accents, slang, and the natural flow of conversation.
I love this. It's almost like being a detective. When you listen to native speakers in everyday situations, you start to notice all the little pronunciation details that make the language sound natural. How do they emphasize certain words? What's the rhythm of their speech? It's like training your ear to understand English in a deeper way.
And you don't have to just rely on formal media. Get involved with local informal media, too. You could ask your new local friends for recommendations on TV shows, YouTube channels, or even Instagram influencers who speak with the local accent. It's a great way to hear English being spoken by regular people, not just broadcasters.
Exactly. And honestly, one of my favorite ways to improve my pronunciation while traveling is by joining conversational meetups or language exchange programs. These are usually informal events where locals and travelers come together to practice speaking different languages. They're a perfect way to meet new people and get focused conversational practice.
Yes, language exchange meetups are fantastic because they provide a structured but low-pressure environment where you can focus specifically on speaking and listening. It's great for pronunciation because you'll get immediate feedback and also have a chance to listen to others who might be learning English as well.
And don't forget about exploring different accents while you're traveling. Depending on where you are, you might hear a variety of regional accents. For example, in the US, you could experience everything from a southern drawl to a fast-paced New York accent. This is an amazing opportunity to not only hear different pronunciations, but also to understand the cultural context behind each one.
That's such a good point. Every region brings its own unique flavor to the English language, and being able to understand a wide range of accents will make you more adaptable in conversation. It also helps you develop a more neutral accent, if that's your goal.
Exactly. And honestly, the more you immerse yourself, the more fun it becomes. You're not just learning a language, you're experiencing a whole new culture and way of life. And as you get more comfortable, your pronunciation will just start to flow more naturally.
That's the magic of immersion. It's like the language becomes a part of your environment, and the more you interact with it, the more natural it feels. The goal is to live in the language, not just study it, and that's how you'll see real improvements in your pronunciation.
So remember, the key to improving your pronunciation through travel is to get out there, get involved, and engage with as many people and experiences as possible. Don't just observe, participate. Your English will improve faster than you ever thought possible.
Okay, so let's dive into some of the real-life scenarios where you can practice your pronunciation while traveling. These aren't just your typical language learning drills. They're actual situations you'll face in daily life where you can put your pronunciation skills to the test.
Exactly, Adam. A big part of improving your pronunciation is contextual practice. It's not enough to just sit in a classroom or listen to audio clips. Being able to practice English in real-world situations is where the magic happens. And, of course, real-life scenarios give you immediate feedback from the people you're talking to.
Totally. Let's start with one of the most common and easy-to-practice scenarios: ordering food at a restaurant or cafe. Now, this might seem simple, but it's actually a great way to practice clear pronunciation. For example, ordering a coffee in a busy cafe can help you focus on pronunciation, intonation, and speaking at a natural pace.
And don't just order the basics like a coffee. Try being specific. Can I have a cappuccino, please? Could I get that with almond milk? The more specific you are, the more you'll get to practice different sounds and phrases. Plus, you'll get some good practice with the polite forms like please and thank you.
That's a great point. Politeness is huge in English pronunciation, especially when you want to sound friendly and respectful. A simple phrase like, "Could I please have?" helps you practice the smooth flow of polite speech.
Another everyday situation is asking for directions. Whether you're lost in a new city or simply curious about where to catch the bus, asking for directions will help you practice clarity and sounding approachable. You'll also hear various local accents, which can be really useful for adapting your own pronunciation.
Absolutely. And when you're the one giving directions, it's a great chance to practice sentence structure, but also key pronunciation points. For example, turn left at the next intersection, or it's just 2 blocks down the road. These phrases help you practice connected speech and the way we blend words together in real conversations.
Speaking of directions, another great scenario is talking to a taxi driver or rideshare driver. This is an awesome opportunity for real-time practice. You might need to pronounce the name of a street, explain where you're going, or even discuss traffic or the weather. Taxi drivers are generally very chatty, so you'll get a lot of chances to speak and listen.
Yes! And this scenario is great because you're usually talking in a relaxed, low-pressure environment. The driver might ask you about your day, where you're from, or what brought you to the city. It's a great chance to practice pronunciation with a native speaker without feeling the pressure of a formal lesson.
Now let's talk about something a little more interactive: shopping. Whether it's in a market, a boutique, or a big mall, shopping is a great way to practice pronunciation in a variety of ways. You'll use language for numbers, sizes, colors, and specific items.
Exactly. Imagine you're trying to buy a shirt and you need to ask about the size or color. You're not just practicing single words like medium or red. You're also getting a chance to use full sentences and practice speaking at a good pace. Do you have this in medium? Or is there a blue one in stock?
And let's not forget about meeting new people. Whether you're at a local event, a party, or even in a hostel, meeting people is a fantastic way to practice pronunciation in a social setting. You can introduce yourself, ask questions, or chat about your travels.
Right. These social interactions are important because they help you get used to speaking naturally, just like a native would. And often, you'll get feedback without even realizing it. If you mispronounce something, the other person will probably correct you in a casual way.
And don't be afraid to ask for clarification when you don't understand something. Whether you're speaking with locals or other travelers, if you don't catch a word or phrase, just ask them to say it again or repeat it more slowly. It's an opportunity for you to practice actively listening as well as speaking.
Good one. And while we're on the topic of conversation, small talk is another great practice opportunity. Small talk can happen anywhere: at the bus stop, in line, at a store, or even in the elevator. It's usually informal, which makes it the perfect setting to practice pronunciation in a relaxed way.
Exactly. You could chat about the weather, the city you're in, or even ask someone for local tips. Small talk helps you get comfortable with common phrases like, "How's it going?" or "What brings you here?" These phrases are often used in casual conversations, and mastering them will make you sound more natural.
And speaking of casual conversations, talking about your experiences while you travel is another excellent way to practice pronunciation. For example, you can share your thoughts about a museum you just visited, your favorite dish, or a funny travel mishap. Not only does it give you practice speaking, but it's also a great way to engage with locals about topics that are relevant to them.
That's so true. And sharing personal stories is an easy way to practice pronunciation while sounding relaxed and natural. The more you talk about your own experiences, the more confident you'll become with speaking English overall.
Exactly. So, from ordering food to engaging in small talk, every real-life scenario is an opportunity to practice your pronunciation. Remember, it's not about perfection. It's about practicing in authentic situations that help you get comfortable with the language.
Right. The goal is to build your confidence and get used to speaking English in all kinds of settings. And don't forget, every time you speak, you're one step closer to sounding more natural and fluent.
So there you have it. Real-life scenarios where you can practice and improve your pronunciation while traveling. It's all about integrating English into your daily routine and seizing every opportunity to speak. Trust me, the more you do it, the easier it gets. All right, now let's discuss a very important topic that's often overlooked when it comes to learning a new language: the role of mistakes in language learning. Now, I know we all want to sound perfect, but let's face it, making mistakes is actually one of the best ways to learn and improve your pronunciation.
Absolutely, Adam. Embracing mistakes is essential for real language acquisition. When you're traveling, you're going to make mistakes, whether it's in pronunciation, grammar, or vocabulary. But instead of getting discouraged, view these errors as opportunities to learn and grow.
Mistakes are really just feedback in disguise. Every time you mispronounce a word or get something grammatically wrong, it's a sign that you need more practice or a different approach. And when you're in a real conversation, this is often corrected on the spot by the person you're talking to, which can be incredibly valuable.
Yes, and the great thing about making mistakes while traveling is that locals are generally understanding and helpful. If you mispronounce something or use the wrong word, most people will give you a gentle correction. It's a way of learning that's much more forgiving than in a traditional classroom setting.
Absolutely. When you make a mistake, it can also lead to a teaching moment. For example, if you mispronounce a word and the other person understands what you meant, but also hears that your pronunciation wasn't quite right, they might take a moment to explain the correct pronunciation. This kind of instant feedback is priceless.
And I think it's important to normalize the idea of making mistakes. In a lot of traditional learning environments, mistakes are seen as something to be ashamed of or avoided at all costs. But when you're traveling, it's actually the opposite. Making mistakes is expected and accepted as a natural part of the learning process.
Yes, and it's also a great icebreaker. If you mispronounce something and the other person corrects you, it opens up a dialogue, and it's often a way to laugh together about the mix-up. This makes your interactions more relaxed and enjoyable, which encourages more speaking practice.
Totally. And when you're learning through mistakes, you start to develop a more resilient attitude towards speaking. You realize that it's okay to get things wrong, and that's actually a part of the journey. This mindset shift can significantly boost your confidence and motivation.
Absolutely. Mistakes are an essential part of the learning curve. In fact, they're often where the breakthroughs happen. When you struggle with a word or a pronunciation and finally get it right, it feels like such an achievement. Those moments of struggle are often what you remember most vividly.
And don't forget about learning regional variations through mistakes. If you're traveling to a country where there's a different regional accent, you might find yourself mispronouncing words because you're not used to the way they sound locally. But this is a great opportunity to learn and adapt.
Yes, exactly. It's through these challenges that you learn not only how to pronounce words, but also how to adjust your speech to different accents and dialects. The more you practice, the more flexible your pronunciation will become, and the more you'll be able to understand and communicate effectively in various settings.
And let's not forget that sometimes making mistakes can lead to funny or memorable stories. I once accidentally told someone I wanted to buy a dog instead of asking where the dog park was. Big difference, but it was a great way to practice and laugh about it together, and I learned from it.
That's a great point. Language learning doesn't always have to be serious. Sometimes, it's about enjoying the journey and the little humorous moments that come with it. These stories can actually be a fantastic way to remember vocabulary and pronunciation. Plus, they make your travel experiences more enjoyable and memorable.
And let's not forget that mistakes are inevitable. No matter how much you prepare or practice, you're going to make them. But rather than stressing over them, embrace them as part of the process. Every mistake is a step closer to mastering the language.
Absolutely. And when you start viewing mistakes in this positive light, it makes your learning journey more enjoyable and less intimidating. It's all about progress, not perfection. So, don't be afraid to speak up, even if you're not 100% sure of what you're saying. The more you practice, the better your pronunciation will become.
Right. And remember, everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers. It's a normal part of communication, and it's how we all learn and grow. So go ahead, make those mistakes, learn from them, and enjoy the journey of discovering English through travel.
All right, Sophia, let's dive into how you can use technology to boost your English pronunciation while traveling. You know, Sophia, we live in a time where technology can be a huge ally in our language learning journey, especially when we're on the go.
That's right, Adam. It's amazing how many tools we have at our fingertips that can support our pronunciation practice, even when we're in the middle of a foreign country. From apps to podcasts to language exchange platforms, technology is helping learners like never before.
Exactly. Let's start with one of the simplest and most accessible tools, language apps. There are so many apps out there that specifically focus on pronunciation. Apps like Elsa Speak, Speechling, or HelloTalk offer features that let you practice and perfect your pronunciation with immediate feedback.
Yes. And what's great about these apps is that they often use speech recognition technology. So, when you speak into your phone, the app gives you feedback on how accurate your pronunciation is. This immediate correction is invaluable, especially when you're traveling and don't have immediate access to a teacher.
That's a great point. These apps are super helpful because they break down pronunciation into smaller chunks. For example, Elsa Speak lets you practice difficult sounds in isolation before moving on to full sentences. It's perfect for targeting those tricky sounds in English, like the th sound or the difference between ship and sheep.
Another awesome tool is YouTube. There are tons of YouTube channels dedicated to pronunciation practice, and many of them focus on regional accents, which is perfect when you're traveling. You can find videos that show you exactly how to pronounce words by looking at mouth movements and hearing examples from native speakers.
I love YouTube for that. Channels like Rachel's English or English with Lucy are great resources for picking up pronunciation tips. And the beauty of it is that you can watch these videos on the go, whether you're on a train, sitting in a cafe, or waiting for a flight. Just pop in your headphones, and you've got a mini pronunciation lesson wherever you are.
And if you're looking for more interactive tools, language exchange platforms like Tandem or HelloTalk are fantastic for connecting with native speakers. These platforms allow you to chat with people from all over the world, which is great for practicing pronunciation in real time. You can send voice messages, do video calls, and even get feedback on your pronunciation from native speakers.
That's such a great point. Plus, you're not only practicing pronunciation, but also learning slang, idiomatic expressions, and how native speakers actually speak in everyday life. And you get to practice speaking in different accents, depending on who you're talking to. It's a truly immersive experience.
And let's not forget about podcasts. I mean, we're talking about podcasts right now, and I think they're one of the best ways to absorb correct pronunciation and rhythm. Listening to podcasts while traveling not only helps you hear real English in action, but it also gives you the opportunity to mimic pronunciation and intonation. You can repeat phrases or sentences to work on sound production.
Exactly. Podcasts like The English We Speak from BBC or All Ears English focus on natural, everyday language, so you're learning how people actually talk, not just textbook phrases. Plus, many podcasts have transcripts available, which you can use to check your pronunciation and see how the words are spelled.
Another great tech tool is Google Translate. Now, I know it's not perfect, but it can be really helpful when you're trying to communicate in a pinch. You can listen to the pronunciation of words or phrases in English by tapping on the speaker icon in Google Translate. It's great for when you need to make sure you're pronouncing something correctly before asking a local for help.
Definitely. And speaking of pronunciation, speech-to-text tools are another powerful resource. Apps like Google Dictation or Siri allow you to speak and see if the technology can transcribe your speech accurately. This is a great way to see if your pronunciation is clear enough for the system to understand, and it gives you feedback in real time.
And it's a fun way to test yourself. If you speak clearly, your phone will accurately transcribe your words. If not, the system might give you a different word or make mistakes in the transcription. It's a fun challenge, and it helps you improve your pronunciation by seeing where you need to adjust.
And we can't forget about language learning podcasts that offer exercises for pronunciation. There are several podcasts specifically designed to help with pronunciation, where they'll slow down words or provide repetition exercises so that you can mimic and master difficult sounds.
Such a great point. And on top of podcasts, there's also audiobooks. Listening to audiobooks while traveling can be an amazing way to improve your pronunciation. You can hear the narrator pronounce words clearly and at a steady pace. I recommend listening to books that have a clear and slow reading style, especially when you're just starting out.
Definitely. Audiobooks also offer the opportunity for shadowing, which we mentioned earlier. You can listen to a section of the book, pause, and then repeat what you heard, trying to match the pronunciation, rhythm, and stress patterns of the narrator. This is a fantastic way to train your ear and your speech.
And if you're traveling and want to make the most of your downtime, you can use language learning games or flashcard apps like Anki or Quizlet to focus on vocabulary that challenges your pronunciation. It's a fun, bite-sized way to practice in between sightseeing or waiting for your flight.
Exactly. You can practice while you're waiting in line or sitting on a bus. Just open your app, go through a few flashcards with pronunciation practice, and before you know it, you're improving your pronunciation without even thinking about it.
So, whether it's through apps, podcasts, audiobooks, or even speech recognition tools, technology is your ultimate ally when it comes to improving pronunciation while traveling. It makes the whole process so much more interactive, accessible, and fun.
And the best part is that you don't need to be in a classroom to get this practice. You can be on the move, on vacation, or exploring a new city, and still be actively improving your pronunciation. Technology truly brings the world of English right to your fingertips.
Exactly. So, take advantage of these tools and use them to enhance your learning while you're traveling. It's a great way to keep your skills sharp and accelerate your progress.
That's it for today's episode. We hope you found this conversation about leveraging travel and technology for improving your English pronunciation both inspiring and practical.
Remember, learning English doesn't have to be stressful. It's a journey, one filled with exciting experiences, new challenges, and lots of opportunities to grow. Whether it's through real-life conversations, technology, or the occasional mistake, every step you take brings you closer to fluency.
Exactly. The key is to stay curious, embrace the process, and don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. Travel gives you the perfect stage to practice, and with all the tools we've discussed, you're set up for success.
And hey, we'd love to hear from you. What's been your most memorable experience learning English while traveling? Share your stories, questions, or even your favorite tech tools in the comments below, or reach out to us on social media.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone you think could benefit from these tips. It's all about building a community of learners who support and inspire each other.
Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep speaking.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.